welcome back. Again, my name is Vanessa, coming to you straight from Wonderland. I just got a quick little interesting video for you today that I'm hoping you're going to enjoy. And I also just want to start out by saying thank you so much to everybody that's watching and liking, subscribing, commenting. There's not a lot of action so far, but anything that I've gotten so far, I've very much appreciated. I really just want feedback. I just really hope you guys are enjoying the video. I know the editing and the filming is not super on point, but I hope you like the content of the videos. I try to get across, I feel like it comes across probably, but I'm not an expert on any of these topics. I'm genuinely just a very curious person, and I like weird shit, and I like history and mysteries and things like that, and my goal for the channel is really just to maybe spark your creativity, curiosity, critical thinking, whatever. I really hope it might spark something in you, get your brain going, make you think some new thoughts. Yeah, so got a quick little interesting video for you today, and that is on vampires. Yes, vampires. So actually, in the 2000s, an alleged vampire skull was discovered in Venice on the island of Lazaretto Nuovo. It was found amongst the 16th century remains of plague victims. Interesting. So, before I get into the alleged discovery of the vampire skull, I kind of just want to get into a little bit the origins of vampires, where we kind of got this idea. So the idea of vampires has actually been around for centuries. Maybe even millennia. There's legends, stories from ancient Mesopotamia, Assyria, Babylon, Greece, India, all around the world. There's kind of these legends of the undead creatures coming back, demons, spirits, whatever you want to call it. But the modern image of a undead, blood-sucking vampire probably originated in Eastern Europe. And so I'm going to talk about two possible origins for vampires. So the first one, there's a real guy, you can look this up, whose name was Vlad Tepes. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He also went by Vlad Dracula, Dracula meaning son of Dracul. His dad's father was Vlad Dracul. But he also mostly is known to history as Vlad the Impaler. And a lot of people credit this guy as where we get our idea of a modern vampire from. Bram Stoker's Dracula was based on Vlad the Impaler. So why was he, why did he become so infamous to history as Vlad the Impaler? Well, he ruled Wallachia, Romania on and off from 1456 to 1462. And he's just known as being brutal. This guy you did not want to get on this guy's bad side or cross this guy in a dark alley, you know what I'm saying? So he fought off, he's most famous, he's actually in Romania, he's very highly regarded. He fought off the Ottoman Empire, and one of his favorite methods of killing his enemies was actually to, while they were still alive, impale them on a wooden stake. And they would basically just slowly die and slide down the stake. It was fucking horrible. If you have not seen Bram Stoker's Dracula, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, then you need to watch that movie. They have images of that in the movie. And, sorry, my cat. It's a great movie. But yeah, if you want to see what I'm talking about, there's at the beginning images of that. And legend also says that, so in my mind, I picture the movie, and in the movie, basically, on the way to his giant castle up the, like, driveway, there's just, like, a row lining the driveway of bodies on stakes. And legend says that he actually liked to dine amongst the dying enemies and dip his bread in the blood. So, yeah, that's some shit. I can see how that can lead to the idea of vampires, and I definitely think, obviously, basing the most famous vampire story off of this guy is why this guy probably gets a lot of credit for the idea of a vampire. And also, there is an area in Romania called Transylvania, and that is where Vlad Dracula was born. So, that's one potential origin of our idea of the modern vampire. The other one basically just comes from us not having an understanding of medicine and science and disease and illness. So a lot of the time throughout modern history, people who were accused of being vampires may have just been people that were either physically or mentally ill, or both. So there's 2 diseases I found that potentially could have given rise to the idea of the vampire. So the first one is porphyria, which is a blood disease, and it can cause severe blisters on your skin due to sun exposure. Vampires can't go in the sun. These people get blisters if they go in the sun, so I also read that the pain they experience, because apparently they are in pain almost all the time when they have this porphyria, is that the pain can temporarily be relieved by ingesting blood. So that's interesting. I also read that the sulfur content in garlic can cause them pain. So this is some good evidence for vampires. So the origin of vampires so far. Also read that the disease can cause your gum line to recede, basically exposing your teeth, which basically looked like fangs. Also, because these people had these blisters, had scarrings, they were in the later stages of the disease pretty disfigured. So probably didn't want to look in mirrors that much. So they were known to avoid mirrors. And also during the Spanish Inquisition, which lasted for a couple centuries, vampires were burned at the stake. But like I said, these vampires could have simply been people that were ill or unwell. So the Spanish Inquisition was a kind of Christian, crusade. So these weak, ill people that were being targeted and burned at the stake obviously developed kind of this fear of Christianity and any symbols that were associated with Christianity, ergo the crucifix. So yeah, this one's pretty solid about the origins of vampires. I definitely think I don't I should have looked into it more, but I don't know how actually prevalent this was during that time. But that makes sense if that's where we kind of got our idea of vampires from, was from this disease. It's interesting. Another disease that possibly could have led to the rise of this idea of the vampire is catalepsy, which is a physical condition affecting the central nervous system. It can cause schizophrenia, epilepsy, and other like side effects of the like damaged central nervous system. And they also have episodes which cause muscles to tense up, so your body gets like super stiff, and then your heart rate and your breathing also lowers. So you're like a stiff, barely beating heart, barely breathing person. So during like these times where we had less knowledge of medical science, sometimes these people would be buried, and sometimes they were buried alive, these people with catalepsy. So there are reports, I guess, of people being mistaken for corpses. Sometimes they would dig themselves out of their grave, and they were pretty much seen as like the Walking Dead, but they were actually probably just had a nervous system issue / disease. Whew. So interesting. I didn't know any of this stuff, guys. I've learned a lot about vampires. So this vampire, let's get back to this vampire skull that was possibly discovered. So it was discovered by Matteo Barini, who is an archaeologist at the University of Florence. And like I mentioned earlier, it was found in a mass grave amongst the corpses of plague victims in Venice, specifically on the Venetian island of Lazaretto Nuovo, which translates in English to New Quarantine, because when the plague came to Venice, Venice is obviously known for its canals. It was a huge port city for trading, so any ships or cargo that would come in from abroad would have to be quarantined on this island. And tens of thousands of people alone died on this island. So there were mass graves of people. So some believed this woman may be a vampire. They, through medical science, they were able to find out that it was a woman, and she was possibly between 61 to 71 years old. So this woman was found with a brick shoved in her mouth. So basically, this was used to stop her from chewing through. When they died, they were covered in what was called a burial shroud. It was just like a veil, basically. And the rock was put there to prevent them from chewing through the veil. So what's with the brick, though? Like, that's intense. That's heavy shit. Like, why did they come up with that? So basically, the plague reached Venice in 1576, and it ended up killing 50,000 people in the city. And some say that they believed these plague victims were vampires because they were misinterpreting the stages of decomposition. So because think also, like, 50,000 people died, so they were pretty much constantly, I hate to say it, but just like dumping bodies into these mass graves. So these grave diggers would come back and see bodies, and they noticed that there were basically a hole and blood around the mouth where their shroud, where their veil was covering their face, and they're like, yo, it's a fucking vampire. They, like, came out of the grave in the night and, like, was eating and drinking somebody's blood. Probably not. It's probably just decomposition. So, basically, at first when bodies die, so it's not long after death, but basically you're going to start to bloat with gases, liquids, and basically there's something that comes out of the mouth and sometimes like the nose called purge fluid. And purge fluid is basically a dark fluid that freely flows from the nose and mouth, and the dark fluid comes from the decay of the gastrointestinal tract contents and the lining. So basically, this can make the veil like disintegrate, like decompose, or whatever you want to call it. So these gravediggers would come back, dump the bodies, and see these holes in the veil and be like, oh fuck. So they would shove bricks into their mouths. Now I think from when I was doing my research, only one has actually been found like this, but there's been other other alleged vampires found, like vampires with stakes driven through their chests with their heads cut off, just stuff like that. People are really superstitious. So also, since this was a woman that was leaking the dark fluid, which looked like blood, and they basically decided that she was a shroud eater. And this is a very specific kind of vampire. I've also read that it's not even really considered a vampire. It's more like a spirit or a demon. But the shroud eater, there's a German name for it because that's where it originated, but I'm not going to attempt to say that. Mostly these were female vampires, and they were also referred to as chewing the shroud or devourers of the night. And basically, according to legend, they devour their burial shroud, so they eat through the veil and they eat it, and then afterwards they eat their own body in order to survive. And there's even, according to some legends, that after they're done eating the veil, eating their own body, they move on to a couple different sources. They move on to either eating the life force of their living family members or actually physically eating their family members. So, yeah. So, the idea of shroud eaters really, like I said, came from the decomposition from the veil disintegrating around the mouth. There was blood, the purge fluid, and also sometimes when these bodies were left in an open grave, scavengers, like animals, birds, whatever, could come pick at the body, making it seem like they were trying to eat themselves. So, and now I'm just gonna, this is an actual quote that I found. I found a couple different alleged sources for the quote, so I'm not sure who actually said it, but I saw that it was written in, or said in 1601. So, we have seen in times of the plague how dead people, especially women who have died of the plague, make smacking noises in their graves like a pig that is eating. And that while this smacking is going on, the plague becomes much worse. usually in the same family, and people die one after the other. Then in 1679, theologian Philip Rohr, he gave a presentation at the University of Leipzig called the Chewing Moratorium. And he genuinely believed that the plague was spread by vampires, and the carriers, pretty much what I gathered from my research is that they were pretty misogynistic and ableist at this period in time. Pretty much they saw women as more easily tempted by the devil, and then disabled people, whether physically or mentally, were pretty much cursed by the devil. So pretty much this dude was saying that the carriers, aka the vampires, were usually women and the disabled. So that kind of nicely goes back to what I was talking about before, the diseases that could have potentially attributed to the origins of the vampire. They were mental, physical disabilities that could arise. Also, this idea of the shroud eater is pointed like directly at women. So yeah, that was really the belief at the time. Like, they burned these vampires at the stake. They burned witches at the stake, who were women mostly, and these vampires also women, disabled people. But yeah, so was this woman actually a vampire? Probably not. Sorry. I really don't know if vampires are real. I don't know. I'm really thinking probably not. But correct me if I'm wrong. Send me sources. Send me links. I'd love to look into that. But, no. From what I've gathered, we didn't have a very good understanding of medical science, and people didn't understand what happens to the body after they died. Even sometimes these gravediggers would take the like nails and beard and stuff growing as signs that they were still alive or undead. But no, that's a normal thing that happens after we die that we now know. Like even in Bram Stoker's Dracula, the movie, like Gary Oldman plays Dracula, and he has these like creepy, gross, long fingernails. It's so bleh. Highly recommend that movie. But yeah, I just thought that was really interesting. Like, they shoved a brick into this dead plague lady's mouth. Like, she didn't have it fucking rough enough. Like, she died from the goddamn plague. She had to live with you assholes thinking she's like a already just, I don't even know if they thought she was a vampire when she was alive, but probably just thinking she was like evil because she was a woman while she was alive. Then she died from the plague. And then you shove a brick into her dead mouth. That's fucked up. That is disrespectful. I can't. Yeah, but that's really all I have to say on that topic. It was pretty interesting. Learned some things. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have any other information about this topic, I'd love to hear it. So, again, from me and Fred, this is Vanessa coming to you straight from Wonderland, and I hope you all stay safe, take care. Like I always say, have a good day, night, evening, afternoon, wherever you are. Love you, lovelies. Bye!